Happy today. Welcome back to the podcast. Happy New Year. Happy 2024. Actually, at the time of recording this, it is December 28th, and I'm recording from Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. I am on a trip with my aunt and uncle and my cousin and her husband and kids. After a nice taste of Utah winter, when I found out they were coming to Cabo, I was kind of like, I'm coming too. But yeah, I know that the time of airing this episode is after 2024, or once it is already 2024. And this time of year is when I start thinking about my words of the year. Now, before we jump into the episode, I'm excited to announce that Self Love and Sweat, the podcast, will now be available on Dash Radio on the Expansion channel. So it has just been my dream and my goal to grow the podcast to help more and more people understand the value of self-love and sweat. And I have been gifted the opportunity to have this show also be featured on the Expansion channel on Dash Radio. So I'm super excited about that. But this time of year is when I start to think about words of the year. Now, let me first start by saying that I do not like New Year's resolutions, and I'm going to tell you why. I think that New Year's resolutions are so played out that people don't take them seriously. And maybe you're somebody who begs to differ and you're like, no, Lunden, actually, I set New Year's resolutions and I nail them every year or whatever. But in my experience, and also especially with being in the fitness industry as I was for many years, over a decade, I feel like New Year's resolutions immediately put us in separation from the goal. And here's why. I think when we set New Year's resolutions to, lose weight or get healthier or do X, Y, or Z, it's like we start the year not there yet. And that's why I think words of the year are so amazing, because it allows you to start right now, choosing your words of the year and being that today, in this moment, in the next minute, in the next hour, in the next day. You get to ask yourself questions like, what would insert your word of the year do? What would they eat? How would they talk to others? How do they wake up in the morning? How do they show up, right? It gives you an opportunity to embody your words of the year. And so I really encourage you listening to this episode today to take this seriously, to really ask yourself, what words do I want to embody this year and beyond? I did an episode on this last year, and my word of the year for 2023, or let's say words of the year, this year I have two as well. Last year, 2023, my words were grateful growth. It was actually kind of like a combination word to remind me that it was time for growth and expansion with gratitude. For those of you that have been following me for a while, or maybe you remember, at the end of 2022, I officially retired from fitness completely. No more fitness coaching, no more personal training, no more fitness partnerships, no more online workouts, no more online group coaching programs. I had Strong at Home for Women for a couple of years, and I just decided it was time to pivot. And my heart knew it, my body knew it, my mind knew it. And so this year has been such an opportunity for grateful growth. 2023 was such an opportunity for grateful growth. I learned a ton. I put myself out there in ways that I never have before, and really developed the podcast as a business, really developed my life coaching business, really developed my beauty counter business. And I just am so grateful for all of that growth. And that word, I would ask myself all the time, what would grateful growth do? How would grateful growth show up in the world? What would grateful growth spend her money on? How would grateful growth engage in conversation? How would grateful growth show up in relationships, romantic ones, friendships, business ones, etc.? And of course I messed up. Of course I did. I'm human. We all mess up. I'm not perfect. Just because I said a word of the year doesn't mean that I just automatically am it, right? We have to practice showing up as it. And I think the great part about solidifying a word of the year and sharing it with people close to you, I mean, you don't have to share it on a podcast or social media or things like that, like I do. I'm just an open book. I share everything, all the things, all the time. But I think something about that really is like a good foundation. You can go back to that always and you can reflect on it like, oh, no wonder that conversation, that relationship, that instance, that situation just didn't, work out in the way that I wanted it to because I was not in congruence with my word of the year. So I don't know, maybe you're thinking of some options right now. Maybe some words are just kind of, dancing around in your head. I encourage you to write all of them down, right? It's not like you just think of the one and then write that one down. Maybe you do, but it's fine just to like engulf in that process of identifying your word of the year and writing down some options. And I want to quickly share mine with you. So my 2 words for 2024 are integrity and endurance. Integrity and endurance. And these words came from a book that I read recently called Anatomy of the Spirit. And if you haven't read this book before, it is such an amazing book. I listened to the audiobook, which from my understanding is a much shorter version of the regular book. The audiobook is only 2.5 hours long. And I think I listened to it probably 5 or 6 times. And I found out about this book because I joined a book club in Utah. A friend of mine that I met living in Utah invited me to join a book club. And that was the first book that we read. And it couldn't have been a better book for me at this time. And if you're listening, read the book, Anatomy of the Spirit. I can't remember. I think it's Caroline Miss is the author, but don't quote me on that. I'll look it up and put it in the show notes. But the book is called Anatomy of the Spirit. And so, integrity and endurance. Integrity and endurance are my words of 2024. And so for me, integrity means being a woman of my word, not saying one thing and then doing another, not saying I stand for one thing and then not acting in congruence with that. I found myself in a space where I felt like people weren't showing up with integrity around me. And instead of blaming others and saying, oh, you didn't do this or you didn't, I really had to look inward and say, okay, game recognizes game, like attracts like. How am I not showing up with integrity? How can I show up with even more integrity so that others of integrity will show up in my life? Right? I'm a firm believer that the way we show up in the world is what we attract. And I know that might trigger some people because we want to live in a world where people do things to us and make us feel a certain type of way. But I really believe game recognizes game, like attracts like. And I really was like, okay, if I feel like people aren't showing up in integrity in my life, how can I show up with even more integrity? And so even though integrity wasn't my word of the year for 2023, I was already thinking about that and already recognizing that a little bit. And for me, integrity, it's just like saying things honestly and respectfully. When I say, I'll be there, I'll be there. When I say, let's do that tomorrow, I mean tomorrow, right? And also, it doesn't mean I'm overextending, right? And it sometimes integrity could look like, hey, you know what? I know I said yes to that and something happened where I can't. And I just wanted to let you know. I want my word to mean something. I think we can all think of people in our lives who they just say something, oh yeah, I'll be there or I'll come or whatever, or I'll get that done. And it doesn't happen and it's frustrating and it's annoying. And so instead of expecting everybody else to show up with integrity in my life, I just am gonna show up with a shit ton of integrity in my life. Funny story about, I say word of the year, but sometimes it ends up being 2, right? And I was talking to my friend Kylie because she's, very much into words and she has a very rich vocabulary. And I was like, I wanted to combine integrity and endurance. And so I was like, what's like the adjective for integrity so I can combine it with endurance? And the word was integrous. So I was like, oh, integrous endurance. And then her and I were Googling the words and whatever. And it was like, this word hasn't been used since the 1600s. And it just made us laugh because I was like, oh, well, I guess I could still choose integrous endurance. It sounds like a Harry Potter spell, integrous endurance. And it just made me laugh. But yeah, I think you can choose whatever word, even if you make it up. But that just makes me laugh. And it was funny. And so the reason why her and I got to the point of learning that integrous wasn't a word and it hasn't been used since the 1600s. What did the definition said? This word has been obsolete since the 1600s. But we got into that conversation because I reached out to her and I'm like, hey, I'm trying to figure out my word of the year and I want to combine integrity and endurance. Isn't the adjective for integrity integrous? And so we just started talking about it. It was really funny. And it doesn't have to be so serious sometimes of like, I wish to tell you my word of the year, friend. We can just like have that dialogue and that conversation. So that's integrity. And that sometimes allows me to say, hey, let me get back to you. I don't know yet. Or no, actually, no. Because I want to be a person of my word. I want to be the person that when somebody talks to me or reaches out to me and I speak to them and my words come out of my mouth, I want them to know Lunden means what she says. If Lunden says she's going to be there, she's going to be there. If Lunden says she cares about me, she cares about me. If Lunden says she'll help me with something, she's going to help me with something. And and then I want to be in my integrity with being proactive in saying otherwise if I need to. Like I said, if I'm going to be there, I want to be there. But if, things come up, I'm not perfect, whatever. And I want to, immediately address that situation and be like, okay, actually, can we do it this day or whatever? Integrity. And then I can ask myself, like, what would integrity do? What would integrity say? Even integrity, like in the morning, if you wake up and say, hey, I'm going to go for a walk this morning and you don't do it, you might be able to hear a horn honking outside. Hopefully it stops soon. Anyways, I'll keep talking and maybe it'll drown out in the background. But I'm here at our hotel in Cabo. And so there's kind of I think you can't hear it. I don't see the audio skipping when I am recording. So anyways, I'm just going to keep going. And if it's crappy audio later, then I'll fix it. But anyways, integrity also means doing what you say you're going to do so you can build trust with yourself, right? If you say, I'm going to go for a walk in the morning and you don't, you're not going to trust yourself. Your mind and your body are not going to be a team to be like, okay, what I say to myself, I do with my body. And I think that's why people, when you don't build trust with yourself, it's really hard to build trust with others. It's really easy to see others as the villain doing things to you and all the stuff. But it starts with ourselves first. We have to step in integrity. We have to say, okay, if I tell myself I'm going to wake up and take the trash out, like those little things matter. They matter so much because then when it gets to the big thing, right? Showing up in the arena for the big thing. If you haven't shown up for the little things, your mind and your body are going to be like, bullshit. You always say that you're going to do this and you don't. And we have to remember, like, we get to train ourselves like a dog. Like, no, I'm going to do this because I said I was going to do it. No, I'm going to do this because I said I was going to do it, and challenge that programming. My second word of the year is endurance. Endurance. Being in it for the long haul. Doing things not for a quick fix, not for fast money, not for quick advancements, but choosing and making decisions that are for the long haul. Also reminding myself I'm in it for the long haul. So how can I prepare my mind and body for endurance, right? What type of thoughts do I need to be thinking for the long haul? What type of foods? What type of friends? What type of music, right? What would endurance do? What would endurance say? How would endurance show up? And yeah, when I think of endurance, it really reminds me of how I take care of my body and my vessel to be in it for the long haul, right? I don't know how long I'm going to live, but I love studying the blue zones, and I want to be around for a long time. Not that you can't make a great impact in a short amount of time, but I don't know, just a part of me is like, I want to be around till like I'm 110. And I think that's because when I'm on social media or I'm around people who are super old, and it's just super motivating to me. Like when they're super old and their cognitive ability is just spot on and they're healthy and they're alive and they're vibrant, that to me is really motivating. So I think a part of me just wants to be that motivation too. So when I think of endurance, I think of the people that live in the blue zones, which if you haven't heard of the blue zones before, they're areas around the world where they have the highest concentration of centenarians, which means people that live to be over 100. And so there's one in Loma Linda, California. There's one in Sardinia, Italy, which is like one of my favorite places ever on the planet. There's one in Costa Rica, one in Japan, one in Greece. And that might be it. But yeah, there's a really good documentary on Netflix called about the blue zones, and each episode highlights one of the different countries and the different locations where people just live a long time and are super happy and have positive relationships and feel good and are just like all about life. And so I think of that when it comes to endurance. And yeah, those are my 2 words of the year: integrity and endurance. And I'm going to continue to, ask myself in the morning, what would integrity and endurance do? And the thing is once you choose the word that you want to embody for your word of the year, you'll just know. You'll just know. It'll resonate with your nervous system. It'll sit right. It'll feel good. And then it'll be very easy as you continue to nurture your word of the year. It'll become very easy to spot the knot, right? There might be moments when I go to text someone and like make up an excuse, and it's like, nope, what would integrity do? Let me, I might, jump into something that's a quick fix or fast or whatever. And I might just be like, no, that doesn't sit right with my word of the year. That doesn't resonate with the person I want to be. And so, yeah, I encourage you to think about your word or words of the year. I think 1 or 2 is great. I think it's way better. And, set New Year's resolutions, set goals, but also have your word of the year. So then it's like right now in this moment, I can be present with my word of the year. My New Year's resolution is not out here somewhere unattainable yet. You don't put yourself in separation or in lack of the New Year's resolution right away. It's like, how do you want to show up? And think about it. And feel free to share your word of the year with me. You can send me a DM on Instagram. I'm at lifelikelunden, lifelikelunden. And you can also hit reply to any of my emails. If you're on my email list and you get my emails, then you can also hit reply to any of those, and the response goes directly back to me. I read all of your replies. So I would love to know what your word of the year is, help you kind of work on it a little bit. And it just feels good to share what we're working on. It was funny. I was doing something the other weekend, and I was with a group of people that were just like complaining about everything, like complaining about their job and how it sucks and the weather and all these things. And I was on a call with some people in my beauty counter team shortly after. And I was like, you know what? Like, why do people have permission? Anyone can have permission to do anything, right? And I'm not the boss of everybody, but I'm like, it's so normal for people to complain about how shit sucks in their life, their job sucks, their partner, this. Like, people can just complain about all the things that suck in their life. I want to make it normal to talk about the things that are great in our lives, to talk about our words of the year, how we want to show up, right? Not that we shouldn't talk about our struggles, but it's like, I don't know. I would rather talk about possibility than marinate in just my job sucks, this is hard. Like, ugh. It's just like there's enough people out in the world talking about what they hate about their life. Let's talk about how we want to show up in our lives. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you at the next episode. Bye.